Have you ever met someone who silently endures for love? She carried a child in her womb and a weight in her soul that no one saw. On the night the world discovered the truth, the ground vanished beneath her feet. But sometimes it's precisely at the bottom of the abyss that life sends a hand to rescue us. If this story has piqued your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. Marina woke with the first morning light filtering through the tear in the ripped curtain. Her body ached, as always. Her 7-month pregnant belly was heavy, and her back complained of another night poorly slept on the living room sofa. She had learned not to bother Edward when he came home late. She had learned many things in the last 3 years of marriage. Things no woman should ever have to learn. The house in Kensington, an affluent district of London, was too large for the emptiness she felt. White walls, designer furniture, priceless artworks hung like trophies of a life that wasn't hers. Marina always felt like an intruder there, a nurse earning little more than £3,000 a month didn't belong in that world of marble and crystal. Edward made sure to remind her of this every day. She slowly got up, feeling the baby stir inside her. It was a boy. They hadn't chosen a name yet. Edward said it was too early, but Marina knew the truth. He didn't want this child, never did. The pregnancy had been an accident, a lapse in the control he so valued. Since she told him about the baby, things had worsened. His words grew sharper, his silences heavier, and his hands, well, his hands were no longer just words. Marina entered the bathroom and looked at her reflection in the mirror. Deep, dark circles marked her face. At 28, she looked 40. Her brown hair, once shiny, now lifeless, was pulled back in a simple bun. She ran her hand over her belly and whispered a prayer. She always did this. She asked for protection for her son, asked for strength to endure another day. She asked for forgiveness for not being strong enough to leave. Her father would have been disappointed. Peter Stone had been a simple man, owner of a petrol station on the M1 motorway. But he had a heart as big as the world. He was the one who raised Marina alone after her mother died, giving birth to her younger sister. Peter taught Marina to be kind, to help those in need, never to judge anyone by appearance. He passed away 5 years ago from a heart condition, and Marina still missed him every day. If he were alive, she would never have married Edward. Her father would have seen through the investor's facade of success and charm. He would have seen the monster hidden beneath the Italian suit. Marina got ready for her shift at the hospital. She put on her white uniform, tied her worn trainers and picked up her battered bag. Edward was still asleep in the master bedroom, probably next to an empty bottle of imported whiskey. She left without making a sound, like a ghost in her own home. The public hospital where she worked was in the East End, far from the luxury of Kensington. There, Marina felt useful. There, she was seen. The mothers who brought their sick children, the elderly who needed care, the patients who called her by name with gratitude in their voices. At the hospital, Marina existed. At home, she was just a shadow Edward tolerated. The day passed slowly between dressings, medications, and words of comfort. But there was something different in the air. One of the nurses commented on the charity gala that would be held that night at the Shard Hotel, one of London's most luxurious. The event was organised by the London Business Association, chaired by none other than Edward Alistair, her husband. Marina didn't even know he was involved with charities. Ironically amusing, she thought, a man without compassion organising a party to raise funds for underprivileged children. When she returned home late that afternoon, she found a note on the kitchen table. Edward's perfect handwriting, always so controlled, simply said, "Wear something presentable. Party at 8. Don't embarrass me." Marina felt her stomach churn. Edward never took her to social events. He preferred to appear alone or, as she had recently discovered through photos on social media, accompanied by Rachel Miller, his young marketing assistant. A 23-year-old woman, blonde, always impeccably made up, with a smile that sold dreams and an ambition that didn't fit her slender body. Marina climbed the stairs with difficulty, leaning on the handrail. She opened the wardrobe and found only old clothes, dresses from when she was younger, nothing that would fit her 7-month belly. Edward never gave her money to buy clothes. He said she didn't need any, that she didn't go anywhere anyway. With the little she earned, Marina paid the bills he forgot to pay and bought food when the fridge was empty. Nothing was left for her. She decided to wear a simple navy blue dress she had sewn herself using fabric she bought at a local shop. It wasn't elegant, it had no embroidery or sparkle, but it was clean and covered her belly. She tied her hair in a low bun and put on a little lipstick. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a tired, pregnant woman dressed like someone who didn't belong in that world. And she truly didn't. Edward arrived home at 7:30, coming straight from the office. He entered the bedroom without looking at her, changed clothes quickly, and left already talking on the phone. Marina followed him to the garage, where the driver was already waiting with the car, a gleaming black Mercedes. Edward finally looked at her, and his face twisted in disgust. "Is that what you're going to wear?" he asked with that tone of voice that made Marina want to disappear. "I don't have anything else that fits," she replied softly. Edward sighed angrily but said nothing more. He got into the car and Marina followed, sitting in the back seat, as far away from him as possible. The journey to the hotel was made in silence. Edward typed furiously on his phone, probably talking to Rachel. Marina looked out the window, watching the city pass by. London at night had a mournful beauty. Millions of lights, millions of lives, and she felt the loneliest of them all. When they arrived at the Shard Hotel, Marina was impressed. The watermelon-shaped building, fully illuminated, looked like a spaceship landed in the middle of the city. Luxury cars lined up at the entrance, where photographers waited to capture the arrival of important guests. Edward got out of the car and went to greet some acquaintances without waiting for Marina. She got out alone, feeling curious and judgmental stares on her simple dress and prominent belly. The ballroom on the top floor was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, tables covered with white linen tablecloths. Arrangements of white flowers and aromatic candles created an atmosphere of sophisticated elegance. Businessmen in Italian suits, women in designer dresses, jewels that cost more than Marina would earn in her entire life. She felt like a stain on that perfect scene. Edward left her alone in a corner and went to circulate the room, greeting important people, laughing too loudly, performing the role of the successful and charitable businessman. Marina took a glass of juice from a passing tray and watched. That's when she saw Rachel enter the ballroom. The young woman was stunning. A tight red dress, generous neckline, blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders, impeccable makeup, high heels that made her legs seem endless. She entered as if she owned the party, and in seconds she was by Edward's side. He greeted her with a smile Marina hadn't seen in years, the smile he used to have for her in the beginning, when they still pretended it was love. Marina felt a pain in her chest that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. Seeing her husband with his mistress in public in front of hundreds of people was a silent humiliation, but no one seemed to notice, or if they did, they didn't care. That world had its own rules, and wives were decorative pieces, easily replaceable. She tried to move away, to find a more discreet place where she could stay until the end of the night. She walked between the tables, dodging waiters with trays of canapes and champagne. That's when she bumped into someone, or rather, someone bumped into her. A tall man with greying hair but still young, perhaps in his early 40s, wearing a dark suit without a tie. He had a glass of red wine in his hand, and with the bump a few drops fell to the floor. The man looked at Marina, and instead of irritation, she saw something different in his eyes. Recognition. "Excuse me," Marina said quickly. "I didn't see, I'm so sorry." The man smiled, a gentle smile that reached his eyes. "It was nothing. My fault, I wasn't paying attention." He paused, studying her face. "You're Peter Stone's daughter, aren't you?" Marina felt her heart quicken. "How do you know?" "Your father saved my life many years ago," the man said, his voice laden with emotion. "I was just a boy running from a difficult situation, and I stopped at his petrol station on the M1 motorway. I was hungry, scared, with nowhere to go. Your father took me in, gave me food, a place to sleep, and helped me find a path. He never wanted anything in return. He said that helping people was the duty of those who could. I never forgot him. My name is Alexander Carter." Marina felt tears burn her eyes. Hearing someone speak so fondly of her father was a rare gift. He truly was. The best man I ever knew. Alexander noticed her tears, noticed the simple dress, her pregnant belly, the deep dark circles under her eyes. "Are you all right?" he asked, with a genuine concern Marina hadn't heard in years. Before she could answer, a loud, furious voice cut through the air. "Marina!" Edward was coming towards her, his face red with rage. Rachel followed him, a satisfied smile on her lips. "What did you do?" Marina didn't understand. "I didn't do anything, I just... Look at my suit." Edward pointed to a small red stain on the white jacket he was wearing. It was the size of a coin, almost imperceptible. But for Edward it was enough. "You spilled wine on me." "It wasn't her," Alexander intervened firmly. "It was my accident. I bumped into her and—" "Stay out of this," Edward snarled. He grabbed Marina's arm tightly, his fingers digging into her skin. "You embarrass me. You always embarrass me. You can't do anything right, not even dress properly for a party." People around began to notice. Conversations were interrupted. Gazes turned towards them. Marina wanted to disappear, to be swallowed by the floor. Edward was getting louder, more aggressive. "You're useless, an ugly, fat, worthless woman. The only thing you do is embarrass me." He pulled Marina forcefully, dragging her to the center of the ballroom. She stumbled, almost falling, protecting her belly with her hands. "Everyone here needs to see who you really are, and nobody who thinks she's worthy of being in this place." Marina was on her knees now, in the middle of the illuminated ballroom, while hundreds of people watched in silence. No one intervened. No one said anything. It was as if she were a spectacle, a morbid attraction in a circus of horrors. Edward picked up an object from one of the nearby pedestals, a small bronze sculpture that was being auctioned for charity. It was heavy, with sharp edges. "You need to learn your place," Edward said, raising the object. Marina saw the blow coming, crossed her arms over her belly, protecting her unborn child. Pain exploded in her shoulder, then in her back. 1 blow, 2, 3. She lost count. Each impact was accompanied by insults, humiliations, promises of more pain. Tears streamed down Marina's face, but she didn't scream. She couldn't scream. If she screamed, it would be worse. It was always worse when she reacted. So she just prayed in silence, asking for the baby to be all right, to survive another night of terror. That's when a deep voice echoed through the ballroom. "Enough!" Alexander Carter had stepped forward, his presence dominating the space. He grabbed Edward's wrist before another blow could fall. "This ends now." Edward tried to break free, but Alexander was stronger. "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? She's my wife. I can do whatever I want." "No, you can't," Alexander replied, his voice low but laden with authority. "And you'll find out exactly who I am if you take another step towards her." He looked around the ballroom, at all those people who had watched silently. "And all of you should be ashamed. To watch this and do nothing. You are complicit." Alexander gently helped Marina to her feet. She could barely stand, her legs trembling, her entire body aching. "You're coming out of here with me," he said softly. "You and your baby. I'll take you to a safe place." "She's not going anywhere," Edward bellowed, but his voice had lost its strength. Alexander looked at him with such intense contempt that Edward took a step back. "If you approach her again, if you try to contact her, if you even think about her, I will use every resource I have to destroy you, and I have unlimited resources." Alexander turned to Marina. "You don't need to be afraid. Not anymore." Marina looked at Alexander, at the man who had been saved by her father years ago and was now saving her. She looked at Edward, at the man who promised to love her and only brought pain. She looked at Rachel, who was already discreetly moving away, realizing the tide had turned. She looked at all those people who had watched in silence while she was beaten. And for the first time in 3 years, Marina made a choice. "I'm coming with you," she said to Alexander, her voice weak but determined. "I am." Alexander led her out of the ballroom, ignoring the whispers, the stares, the cell phone cameras that were now recording everything. A discreet security guard appeared beside them, ensuring no one followed. Marina felt the fresh night air on her face and began to cry, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time in years she had taken a step, a small but significant step, a step away from hell and towards the possibility of a different life. In Alexander's car, as the city of London passed by the window, Marina touched her belly and whispered to the baby, "We're going to be okay, I promise we're going to be okay." And for the first time since she discovered her pregnancy, she truly believed those words. Behind her, in the hotel ballroom, Edward stood still holding the blood-stained sculpture, while his perfect facade began to crack. Rachel had already disappeared, along with several of the guests who didn't want to be associated with the scandal. The cameras continued recording, the videos were already circulating on social media. Edward Alistair's downfall had begun, and this time there would be no fixing the image he had so carefully cultivated. The raw, terrible truth was exposed for the world to see, and Marina, finally, was free to start breathing again. The apartment where Alexander took Marina was in Chelsea, in a discreet but elegant building. It wasn't ostentation, it was comfort. Walls in light tones, simple but quality furniture, large windows that let in the sunlight. When Marina entered, accompanied by Alexander and a private nurse he had called, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The nurse, a woman in her 50s named Teresa, examined Marina with professional care and maternal affection. The marks of the assault were evident, bruises on her arms, back and shoulder. But what worried them most was her emotional state. Marina was in shock, trembling, unable to fully process what had happened. Teresa helped her take a warm bath, dressed her in comfortable clothes that Alexander had provided, and put her to bed. "The baby is fine," Teresa said after checking the heartbeats with a portable Doppler. "Strong and healthy. But you need to rest. Your body and mind need time to recover." She administered some pregnancy-safe medications for pain and to help Marina sleep. And for the first time in months, Marina fell asleep without fear. Without fear of hearing the door open, without fear of waking up to screams, without fear of again becoming the target of someone's fury. In the following days, Marina barely left her room, not because she was forbidden, but because her body and soul demanded this seclusion. Alexander hired a therapist, a psychologist named Dr. Beatrice, specializing in trauma and domestic violence. The first sessions were difficult. Marina cried a lot, spoke little, but gradually the words began to come out. Years of emotional and physical abuse poured out in hour-long sessions that felt like a lifetime. "It's not your fault," Dr. Beatrice repeated constantly. "Nothing he did was your fault. You didn't provoke it. You didn't deserve it. You are a victim, not the cause." Marina listened but still couldn't fully believe it. Years of being convinced otherwise don't disappear in days. But it was a start. Alexander visited daily, always respectful, always attentive. He brought books, fresh fruit, words of encouragement. He told stories about Marina's father, about how Peter Stone had changed his life that night on the road. Alexander was only 16 when he fled an abusive home. He was hungry, scared, aimless. Peter not only fed and sheltered him, but also helped him find a job and finish his studies. It was thanks to that generous man that Alexander managed to build his life, his company, his fortune. "I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to repay him, I would," Alexander said one morning, sitting by the bed where Marina was having her coffee. "When I saw you at that party, pregnant, in that simple dress, I realized who you were. Your eyes are just like his, and when I saw what that man was doing to you, I knew this was my chance to honor that promise." Marina looked at him with gratitude. "You don't owe me anything. My father did what he did because that's who he was. He didn't expect anything in return." "I know," Alexander smiled. "That's precisely why I want to do this. Not out of debt, but by choice, because it's the right thing to do." While Marina recovered physically and emotionally, outside those safe walls, a storm was brewing. The videos of the assault at the charity gala had spread like wildfire on social media. Some guests, too late to be called brave, had filmed everything. The images of Edward beating pregnant Marina in the middle of a ballroom full of people who merely watched shocked the country. The comments were furious, indignant, demanding justice. The press surrounded Edward. Reporters camped at the door of his Kensington home, cameras ready to capture any movement. His social media was flooded with hate messages. Companies began to cut commercial ties with him. Contracts were cancelled, partnerships dissolved. The London Business Association removed him from the presidency and issued a statement of repudiation. Edward Alistair, the successful investor, the respected businessman, was being destroyed by the very image he had cultivated. The irony was palpable. Rachel Miller also did not escape unscathed. Photos of her with Edward at the party, smiling while Marina was being assaulted in the background, circulated widely. Her marketing agency fired her the day after the scandal. Brands she represented cut all ties. Her career, built on perfect selfies and rehearsed smiles, collapsed in a matter of hours. Rachel tried to defend herself on social media, claiming not to know about the situation, but no one believed her. She had chosen to be by the side of a married man, had chosen to ignore the pregnant and humiliated wife. Now she paid the price of silent complicity. Edward, however, was not the type to accept defeat. The rage that had always simmered beneath the surface now boiled out of control. He hired expensive lawyers, tried to sue. Those who disseminated the videos, threatened anyone who might testify against him. But he was fighting a losing battle. Public opinion was decided. Edward was the villain, and villains don't get second chances in the court of the internet. More than that, Edward wanted Marina back. Not out of love, it was never love. It was about control. It was because she had dared to leave him, she had dared to expose his flaws to the world, and he couldn't allow that. So he began a campaign of silent terror. Messages from blocked numbers reached Marina's phone. "You're still my wife. You'll come back. That bastard you're carrying is my son. You can't take that from me. I'll find you, and when I do, you'll regret it." Marina showed the messages to Alexander, who immediately activated his security team and lawyers. Protective orders were requested in court. Cameras were installed in the building. Security guards began round-the-clock patrols. But even with all this protection, Marina lived in fear. Fear doesn't disappear just because you change your address. It clings to the soul like a permanent shadow. Dr. Beatrice worked intensely with Marina on this. Fear is natural after what you've been through, but it cannot control your life. You have the right to feel safe, to live without looking over your shoulder every second. The sessions were painful but necessary. Marina began to understand that the violence she suffered did not define who she was. She was more than a victim. She was a survivor. And survivors have the power to rebuild. 2 weeks after leaving Edward, Marina woke up with contractions. They weren't labor contractions. It was too early for that. But they were concerning enough for Teresa to call a doctor immediately. Dr. Henry, a trusted obstetrician of Alexander's, examined Marina and determined she was in premature labor. The stress, the physical and emotional trauma had all taken their toll. Marina was admitted to a private clinic with all the care and attention that money could buy. Alexander didn't leave her side. He held her hand during contractions, wiped her sweat, spoke words of encouragement. "You are strong, Marina. Stronger than you imagine. You will get through this. You and your son will be fine." Alexander's words were a balm. Marina clung to them like a lifeline in a sea of pain. The labor lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of struggle, controlled breathing, fear mixed with hope. When the baby's piercing cry finally echoed through the room, Marina broke down in tears, not from pain, but from profound relief and instant love. The boy was small, weighing only 5.5 pounds at birth, but he was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a tuft of dark hair, and a pair of impressively powerful lungs. "He's beautiful," Marina whispered, holding her son for the first time. The baby immediately calmed in her arms, as if recognizing the voice that had accompanied him for months in the womb. "Peter. I'll name him Peter, after my father." Alexander, who had watched everything from a corner of the room, smiled with tear-filled eyes. Your father would have been very proud of you, Marina. Very proud." And in that moment, Marina felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right in the end. But the peace was short-lived. While Marina was in the maternity ward, Edward managed to find out where she was. It's unknown how. Perhaps he bribed someone. Perhaps he used his still-existing contacts in the business world. The fact is, he showed up at the clinic demanding to see his son. The security guard stopped him, but Edward didn't leave without causing a scene. He screamed in the clinic lobby, saying Marina had stolen his son, that he had rights, that this baby was his. The scene was filmed by visitors and patients, and of course it ended up on social media within minutes. Edward, out of control, unhinged, showing the world exactly who he really was. The comments were relentless. How did this woman endure living with him? What a monster! He needs to be arrested. Public pressure grew exponentially. Alexander sprang into action. His lawyers filed a lawsuit requesting the suspension of all Edward's rights over the baby and a permanent restraining order. They gathered the threatening messages, the videos of the assault at the party, medical reports proving Marina's injuries, and witness testimonies. The process was swift, considering the standards of the British justice system. The judge who analysed the case, Judge Fiona Cross, known for her work in defending women, did not hesitate. Edward was prohibited from approaching Marina and the baby, under penalty of immediate arrest. But this did not calm Edward. On the contrary, with every door that closed, his rage intensified. He began to lose everything. The company he built was collapsing. Investors withdrew capital. Employees resigned, not wanting to associate their names with his. The house in Kensington, mortgaged to cover growing debts, was about to be repossessed by the bank. Rachel, whom he thought would return when things calmed down, had left the country, fleeing to Marbella with a new rich boyfriend. Edward was alone, and men who are alone, accustomed to power, can be very dangerous. He began to plan. If he couldn't get Marina back legally, he would find other ways. He started watching the Chelsea building from afar, noting entry and exit times, studying the security guard's routine. His obsession grew every day. It wasn't love, it never was. It was possession. And Edward didn't let go of what he considered his. Marina, in the apartment with little Peter, tried to establish a routine. Breastfeeding, changing diapers, rocking the baby to sleep. Simple tasks that most mothers do without thinking. But for Marina, they were acts of courage. Each time she rocked Peter, she remembered how she protected her belly during the assaults. Each time her son smiled, she cried with gratitude that both of them had survived. Alexander remained present, but always respectful. He didn't try to replace the role of a father. He didn't force anything. He was just there, a friend, a protector, someone Marina could trust. Gradually, between late-night conversations while Peter slept, between shared breakfasts and walks in the park under the watchful eyes of security, something began to grow between them. It wasn't ardent passion. It wasn't a soap opera romance. It was something deeper, more solid. Respect, admiration, genuine affection. One night, after Peter finally fell asleep after hours of colic, Marina and Alexander were in the living room. She was exhausted, her hair messy, wearing simple pajamas. Alexander had just arrived from a business meeting, still in his suit, but with his tie already loosened. He prepared a chamomile tea for her, and they sat on the sofa in comfortable silence. "You don't have to do all this," Marina said suddenly. "You've already done so much, more than anyone would. I don't want to be a burden." Alexander looked at her seriously. "You are not a burden, Marina. Never have been, never will be. I choose to be here. I choose to help you and Peter, and it's not just because of the promise I made to your father. It's because I want to. Because you both deserve a better life than you've had until now." Marina felt her eyes fill with tears. "Why? Why are you so good to me? I'm nothing. I'm just a nurse who made the mistake of marrying the wrong man." "You are so much more than that," Alexander said, gently taking her hand. "You are a strong woman who survived hell. You are a mother who protected her child with her own body. You are someone who, despite everything, still has kindness in her heart. And no, you didn't make a mistake marrying him. He made the mistake of not valuing the treasure he had. Alexander's words touched something deep within Marina. For the first time in years, she felt seen, truly seen, not as an object, not as an emotional punching bag, but as a human being with inherent worth. She leaned in and rested her head on his shoulder. Alexander embraced her delicately, as if she were made of crystal. They remained like that for a long time, simply existing. In the same space, sharing silence and human warmth. There was no urgency, no expectations. Just two human beings who found comfort in each other amidst the chaos their lives had become. But while they shared that moment of peace, Edward was on the other side of the city in his empty office, looking at the photos of Marina he still had on his phone. Photos from when they first met, when she still smiled at him, when she still believed his promises. Edward squeezed the phone so hard that the screen cracked. "You'll come back to me," he whispered, to the photo. "One way or another, you'll come back, and that man will pay for getting involved in what's none of his business." Edward's obsession was reaching dangerous levels, and when a dangerous man has nothing left to lose, he becomes unpredictable. The storm was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning, and Marina, Alexander, and little Peter would have to face even greater challenges in the days to come. But for now, on that silent night in Chelsea, they had peace. And sometimes peace is all we need to find the strength for the next day. The following months brought significant changes for Marina. Little Peter grew healthy and bright, with curious eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the world around him. Marina returned to work, but differently now. Alexander, with his network of contacts, helped her get a job at a private clinic in Belgravia, with flexible hours that allowed her to care for her son. The salary was 5 times higher than what she earned at the public hospital, and for the first time in her life, Marina had financial stability. But more important than the money was the internal transformation. Therapy with Dr. Beatrice continued twice a week, and Marina began to deconstruct years of conditioning. She learned to recognize patterns of abuse, to understand that nothing Edward did was her fault, to rebuild her self-esteem brick by brick. It wasn't easy. There were days when she woke up, and the first thing she felt was guilt. Guilt for having left Edward, guilt for having exposed the family, guilt for accepting Alexander's help. Guilt is an emotion that abusers plant in their victims, Dr. Beatrice patiently explained. They make you believe that you deserve what you suffer, that you provoked the violence, that if you were just better, things would be different. But that's a lie, Marina. A cruel lie that only serves to keep you trapped. You have to pull that guilt out by the roots, like a poisonous weed. Marina was trying. Some days were better than others. There were moments when she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman she saw. Her hair was better cared for, with a modern cut that Teresa suggested. Her clothes were new, well-fitting, beautiful. The dark circles under her eyes had diminished. She was eating well, sleeping better, laughing more. She was becoming a version of herself she thought she had lost forever. The relationship with Alexander also evolved, slowly but steadily. They hadn't defined what they were to each other. They weren't just friends, but they weren't a couple in the traditional sense either. Alexander never pressured her for anything. He respected Marina's time, understanding that she needed to heal before she could open her heart again. But there were moments, small moments, that spoke more than words. Like that Sunday afternoon when they went to Hyde Park with Peter. Alexander pushed the stroller while Marina walked beside him, telling him about her day at the clinic. They bought popcorn to feed the ducks on the lake, and when a cold breeze arose, Alexander took off his own jacket and placed it over Marina's shoulders without her needing to ask. Simple gestures, but loaded with meaning. Or that night when Peter had a high fever. Marina panicked, memories of the premature labor still fresh in her mind. Alexander arrived in 15 minutes, bringing the pediatrician with him, and stayed awake all night by Marina's side, ensuring the baby was well. When the fever finally broke and Peter fell asleep peacefully, Marina collapsed in tears of relief in Alexander's arms. He held her, stroked her hair, and whispered that everything was fine, that Peter was fine, that she was being a wonderful mother. If you were living this story, would you believe in the possibility of a new love after so much suffering? Share your opinion in the comments. While Marina rebuilt her life, Edward sank deeper and deeper. His company had declared bankruptcy. The house in Kensington was auctioned off. He now lived in a small rented apartment in Bethnal Green, with old furniture and stained walls. Everything he had built, his entire image of success, had crumbled, and he blamed a single person for it: Marina. In Edward's distorted mind, none of this was his fault. He wasn't the aggressor, he wasn't the monster, he was the victim of a setup. Marina had seduced Alexander, had lied about the abuse, had orchestrated everything to destroy him and get the magnate's money. At least that's what Edward repeated to himself until he believed this alternative version of reality. But believing wasn't enough. Edward wanted revenge, and for that he needed allies. He found some in the underworld of London society. Desperate men, unscrupulous, willing to do anything for money. Edward didn't have much money, but he had some jewels he hadn't sold yet. He had some contacts who still owed him favors. He had enough resources to put his plan into action. The plan was simple but effective. Kidnap Marina when she left work. Take her to an isolated place. Force her to sign papers transferring Peter's custody to him. Convince her, by force if necessary, to record a video saying everything was a lie, that Alexander had manipulated everything. Edward didn't think much beyond that. His mind, consumed by rage and resentment, couldn't process the consequences. He just wanted control back. He wanted Marina to be that frightened woman again, who cowered when he raised his voice. But Edward didn't count on something. Marina was no longer that woman. Alexander's lawyers, meanwhile, worked tirelessly on the criminal case against Edward. In addition to the protective orders, they were building a robust case for assault, bodily harm, domestic violence, and threats. They had videos, photos, medical reports, witness testimonies. They had everything they needed to ensure Edward was convicted and spent years in prison. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. It would be at the Family and Domestic Violence Court, within Suffolk Crown Court. Marina would have to testify, relive everything she went through, look into Edward's eyes again. The idea terrified her. Dr. Beatrice worked intensely with her in the preceding weeks, preparing her emotionally for that moment. "You are no longer the woman he abused," the psychologist repeated. "You are stronger now. You have a voice, you have support, you have the right to be heard. And most importantly, you have the truth on your side. The truth always wins in the end." Marina wanted to believe that. But the fear persisted. Fear that justice wouldn't be served, fear that Edward would find a way to escape, fear that everything would go back to how it was before. These were rational fears based on years of trauma. But Alexander was always there to remind her that she wasn't alone. "I will be by your side throughout the entire trial," he promised. "My lawyers are the best in London. We won't let him escape. Not this time. Edward will pay for what he did, Marina. I guarantee it." Alexander's words were a balm, but Marina knew. Nothing was guaranteed. The British justice system was flawed, slow, sometimes unjust, especially when it came to cases of domestic violence. How many women did she know who had reported their abusers and saw no justice served? How many returned to violent homes because they had nowhere to go? Marina had privileges that most didn't. She had resources, protection, expensive lawyers. But even so, the fear persisted. The night before the hearing, Marina couldn't sleep. She stayed awake watching Peter sleep in the crib beside her bed. The boy was 4 months old now, plump and healthy. He smiled when he saw Marina, stretched out his little hands wanting to be held, made adorable sounds trying to communicate. Marina gently touched her son's face and thought about how everything could have been different. If she had stayed with Edward, if she hadn't met Alexander at that party, if she hadn't had the courage to leave. Where would she be now? Probably dead. Or worse, alive, but completely broken. An empty shell of a person. "I'm going to be strong for you," Marina whispered to Peter. "I'm going to face your father in court, and I'm going to win because you..." deserve to grow up in a world where monsters are held accountable for their actions. You deserve a mother who fights, not one who hides. And in that silent promise, Marina found the strength she needed. The morning of the hearing arrived grey and rainy, typical of London in autumn. Marina dressed carefully, choosing a simple but dignified outfit. Black trousers, a white blouse, flat shoes. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be used against her. She tied her hair in a bun, put on a little makeup to disguise her sleepless night. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a determined woman. Scared, yes, but determined. Alexander picked her up at 7 in the morning. Peter stayed with Teresa, who promised to care for him with all the love in the world. The journey to the court was silent. Alexander held Marina's hand, transmitting strength without words. When they arrived, journalists were already outside. The case had gained so much repercussion that it became national news. The pregnant nurse assaulted by her rich husband at a charity gala. It was the kind of story the media loved. Drama, violence, social inequality, redemption. Inside the court, the hearing room was full. Lawyers from both sides, the public prosecutor, the judge, social workers, court officers, and at the back, some chairs for the public. Marina saw familiar faces. Colleagues from the hospital where she worked, neighbours from the Chelsea building, even Dr. Beatrice was there for emotional support. And then Marina saw Edward. He was sitting next to his lawyer, a middle-aged man who looked like he didn't quite believe in the cause he was defending. Edward had lost weight, had deep dark circles under his eyes, an unshaven beard, a crumpled suit. He was no longer the powerful, arrogant man who commanded boardrooms. He was just a shadow of his former self. But when his eyes met Marina's, she saw what haunted her. Rage, pure, distilled rage. Edward looked at her as if he could kill her with a thought alone. Marina felt a chill run down her spine. Alexander noticed and squeezed her hand tighter. "He can't hurt you anymore," he whispered. "Not here, not now, not ever." Marina nodded, trying to believe. The hearing began. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s named Prosecutor Camilla Smith, known for her firm stance in cases of violence against women, presented the evidence. The videos were displayed on a large screen. Marina had to watch that horrible night again. She saw herself being dragged to the center of the ballroom, kneeling, being beaten while protecting her belly. She saw the expression of sick pleasure on Edward's face with each blow. She heard the screams, the insults, the threats, and she saw all those people watching without doing anything. Tears streamed down Marina's face, but she didn't look away. She needed to witness it, needed to acknowledge what she had been through to finally leave it behind. When the videos ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Even Edward's lawyer seemed uncomfortable. Then came the medical reports, photos of the injuries, reports of the bruises, documentation of the premature labor caused by stress and physical trauma. Testimonies from neighbors who heard screams coming from the Kensington house, from employees who witnessed humiliations, from Edward's former colleagues who confirmed his aggressive and controlling behavior. When it was Marina's turn to testify, she stood up with trembling legs. She walked to the front of the room, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the witness chair. The judge, Judge Fiona Cross, a woman in her 50s with kind but firm eyes, looked at her with compassion. "Marina, I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me in your own words what happened, not just on the night of the party, but throughout your entire marriage to the defendant Edward Alistair." The judge's voice was encouraging. Marina took a deep breath and began to speak. She told of how she met Edward, of their courtship that seemed like a fairy tale, of the marriage that quickly turned into a nightmare. She told of the first time he assaulted her, 2 months after the wedding, because she had forgotten to buy his favorite whiskey. She told of the constant humiliations, of how he controlled every aspect of her life, of the isolation from friends and family. She told of the unplanned pregnancy, and how Edward reacted with fury, suggesting she get rid of the baby. She recounted that night at the party, every blow, every cruel word, every second of terror. And she told about Alexander, about how he saved her, about the chance for a new beginning she finally had. Her voice was firm, without victimhood, without dramatization. Just the raw, unvarnished truth. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even some court officers discreetly wiped away tears. Edward's lawyer tried to cross-examine her, tried to plant doubts, suggest that she was exaggerating, that perhaps she had provoked Edward's reactions. But Marina did not falter. She answered each question calmly and clearly. Prosecutor Camilla, the prosecutor, intervened whenever the questions were inappropriate or offensive, protecting Marina from being re-victimized. Edward also had his chance to speak, but his words only dug him a deeper hole. He blamed Marina for everything. He said she was negligent, that she didn't take care of him properly, that she constantly provoked him. He said the assault at the party was a moment of uncontrolled rage caused by the public humiliation she inflicted on him by spilling wine. He showed no remorse, offered no apologies, acknowledged no fault. It was pathetic to watch. A man completely disconnected from reality, incapable of seeing his own flaws. When the hearing finally ended, after nearly 6 hours, the judge announced she would deliver her verdict in 1 week. Marina left the court exhausted but somehow lighter. She had done her part. She had told her truth. Now it was up to justice. Alexander took her straight home. Peter was awake, crying, wanting his mother. Marina picked him up and rocked him, feeling the warm, familiar weight of her son against her chest. "It's over," she whispered. "The hardest part is over." Alexander sat beside her on the sofa, put an arm around her shoulders, and the three of them stayed like that, an improvised but real family, finding comfort in each other. But far from there, Edward was making plans. The hearing had not gone as he expected. He saw in the judges' eyes that he would be convicted. He saw in the gazes of those present that there was no sympathy for him. His last chance to regain control through legal means had failed. Only one path remained, a dangerous, illegal, desperate path. But Edward was beyond reason, and men beyond reason are capable of anything. The week that followed the hearing was marked by constant tension. Marina tried to maintain her routine, work at the clinic, care for Peter, go to therapy. But there was a sense that something was about to happen. The building's security guards were put on high alert. Alexander hired 2 more men for Marina's personal security. She didn't go anywhere without being accompanied. Edward, for his part, was putting his plan into action. He had hired 2 men, ex-convicts he met through dubious contacts. He paid them with the last jewels he had, promising more money after he got what he wanted. The men asked no questions. Work was work. They spent days observing Marina's routine, noting schedules, studying weaknesses in security. Edward was obsessed. He spent hours drawing maps, planning every detail. In his sick mind, he still believed that if he could talk to Marina, alone without Alexander around, she would come back. She would see that her place was by his side, that they were a family. On Thursday of that week, Marina had a special session with Dr. Beatrice. The psychologist noticed that Marina was particularly anxious. "The verdict is out tomorrow," Marina said, wringing her hands nervously. "I should be relieved, but I can only feel fear. What if he's acquitted? What if the judge decides there isn't enough evidence? What if he walks free?" "Marina, look at me," Dr. Beatrice said firmly. "You attended that hearing. You saw the evidence. You heard the testimonies. There's no way he'll be acquitted. Justice will be served. You need to trust that. And more importantly, you need to trust yourself. You are strong. You survived. And no matter what happens tomorrow, you will continue to survive." The psychologist's words helped, but the fear persisted. Marina left the office and went straight home, accompanied by one of the security guards. Peter was with Teresa, who kept him entertained with colorful toys and children's songs. Marina picked up her son and hugged him tightly. "I love you so much," she whispered into the baby's ear. "Everything I do is for you, so that you grow up in a better, safer world." Peter responded with a toothless smile and a joyful shout that made Marina laugh despite everything. That night, Alexander arrived with Japanese food and a bottle of non-alcoholic wine for Marina. They dined together, chatting about trivial things, avoiding the elephant in the room. After Peter fell asleep, Alexander and Marina sat on the sofa, each lost in their own thoughts. "Alexander," Marina said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I never properly thanked you for what you did, for everything you did. You saved my life, my son's life. You gave me a chance to start over when I thought there was no way out. I'll never be able to repay that." Alexander turned to her, taking her hands in his. "You don't need to repay anything, Marina. Seeing you regain your strength, your dignity, your joy of living, that's repayment enough. And I didn't do this expecting anything in return. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Because your father taught me that kindness isn't a transaction. It's a choice." Marina felt her eyes fill with tears. "My father would have liked you very much." She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Alexander, I need to tell you something. In the last few months, while you've been by my side, while you've helped me get back on my feet, something has changed. I feel something for you. I don't know exactly what it is yet. I don't know if it's gratitude or friendship or something more. But I feel it. And that scares me, because the last time I felt something for someone, it turned into a nightmare. And I don't know if I can trust my feelings again." Alexander gently caressed Marina's face. "I feel something for you too, Marina, since that first night when I took you out of that ballroom. But I never wanted to pressure you, never wanted you to feel you owed me anything. You need time to heal, to rediscover yourself, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. There's no rush, no expectations, just two human beings navigating life together at a pace that's comfortable for both." Marina leaned in and rested her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, existing in the same space. There was no kiss, no grand promises, just a silent acknowledgement that something special was growing between them, something that deserved to be nurtured with patience and care. Friday morning dawned clear and sunny, contrasting with the tension in the air. Marina dressed formally, as she would have to go to court to hear the verdict. Alexander would accompany her, along with his entire team of lawyers. Teresa would stay with Peter in the apartment, with doubled security. But Edward was also waking up early that day, not to go to court. He already knew what the verdict would be. In his heart, obscured by rage and obsession, he had already decided he would not accept it. If justice was against him, he would make his own justice. He called the two men he had hired and confirmed the plan. They would wait for Marina to leave the building. When she got into the car with the security guards, they would act. They would force the car to stop using another vehicle, immobilize the guards with weapons, and take Marina. Where? Edward wasn't yet sure, but he had an abandoned warehouse in mind in the west of the city where no one would find them. Marina left the building at 9 in the morning. The day was beautiful. Children played in the small park opposite. Birds sang in the trees. It was a disturbing contrast to what was about to happen. She got into the car, Alexander beside her, 2 security guards in the front. The driver started the engine and began driving towards the court. They were a few blocks from the building when a black van appeared out of nowhere and violently collided with the side of the car. The impact was brutal. The car spun, hit the curb. The airbag exploded. Marina screamed, instinctively protecting her head. Alexander covered her with his own body. The security guards tried to react, but the doors were ripped open and armed men pulled them out of the vehicle. "Get the woman! Quick!" a voice shouted. Rough hands grabbed Marina, pulling her from the car. She struggled, kicked, screamed, but they were 2 large men, and she was still dazed by the accident. Alexander tried to hold her, but he was pushed forcefully, falling to the ground. One of the men pointed a gun at him. "Stay quiet if you want to." Live. Marina was dragged into the van. The door slammed shut. The vehicle sped away, leaving behind Alexander injured in the middle of the street, the security guards trying to recover, shocked bystanders calling the police. Everything happened in less than 2 minutes. Fast, efficient, brutal. Inside the van, Marina was terrified. The 2 men didn't speak to her, only held her firmly. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead caused by the accident. Her mind raced. Peter, her baby. Who would care for him if something happened to her? Alexander. Was he all right? The security guards? And then she understood. Edward. It had to be Edward. He was behind this. He wouldn't accept losing control. He wouldn't accept defeat. And now she was completely at his mercy again. The van stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse in Stratford. Marina was dragged inside. The place smelled of mold and abandonment. There was only an old chair in the middle of the empty space. They pushed her into the chair and tied her hands and feet with rough ropes that cut into her skin. Then the two men left, leaving her alone in the darkness, punctuated only by rays of sunlight entering through holes in the roof. Marina tried to calm down. She took deep breaths as Dr. Beatrice had taught her. Panic wouldn't help. She needed to keep a cool head, find a way to escape, or at least buy time until she was found. Alexander surely had already alerted the police. They would be looking for her. She just needed to survive until then. She heard footsteps approaching. The warehouse door opened and Edward entered. He looked even worse than at the hearing. Two thin, deep, feverish eyes, trembling hands. He looked like a man, on the verge of a mental breakdown. He walked up to Marina and stood in front of her, just staring. "You destroyed me," he finally said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Everything I built, everything I was, you destroyed. Why?" "I gave you everything. A beautiful house, clothes, food. What more did you want?" "Respect," Marina replied, her voice surprisingly firm despite her fear. "Dignity, true love, things money can't buy, things you never knew how to give." Edward let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You think that man loves you? Alexander? He's just using you, Marina. As soon as he gets tired, he'll throw you away like a broken toy, just like I should have done a long time ago." "You're wrong," Marina said. "Alexander treats me like a human being, something you never did. And even if he didn't love me, even if he was just helping me out of obligation, it would still be infinitely better than anything you offered." Rage contorted Edward's face. He stepped closer, raised his hand as if to strike her, but stopped in mid-air. "You're going to come back to me. You're going to sign the papers giving Peter's custody to me. You're going to record a video saying everything was a lie, that you set all this up with Alexander to destroy me and get his money." "Never," Marina said without hesitation. "You can kill me, but I'll never do that. My son will not grow up near you. He will not become what you are. I'd rather die." Edward pulled a gun from his waistband. Marina recognized the pistol. It was the same one Edward kept locked in a safe at home. "Then die," he said, pointing the gun at her head. His finger was on the trigger, trembling. Marina closed her eyes and thought of Peter. She thought of Alexander. She thought of her father. And she found peace. If this was her end, at least she had fought. She had tried. She had not died on her knees like a coward, but the shot never came. Instead, they heard sirens. Many sirens. The police had found the warehouse. Edward panicked. He ran to the dirty window and saw police cars surrounding the building. He saw SWAT agents positioning themselves. He saw Alexander there, coordinating everything, speaking with the detective. Edward returned to Marina, the gun still in his hand. "You did this. You brought them here. How?" Marina didn't know how the police had found them so quickly. She didn't know that Alexander had placed a discreet GPS tracker in her bag weeks ago, precisely fearing something like this. She didn't know that the businessman had mobilized all his contacts, from the CID to the Metropolitan Police, ensuring a rapid response. But she didn't need to know. She just needed to buy time. "Edward, listen," she said, trying to sound calm. "You can still get out of this. You can surrender, cooperate. Maybe you can get a plea, deal a lighter sentence. But if you hurt me, if you shoot me, your life ends here. You'll never see the light of day outside a cell again. Think about it. Think about what's more worthwhile." Edward was clearly conflicted. The gun trembled in his hand. Drops of sweat ran down his forehead. Outside, a megaphone amplified the detective's voice. "Edward Alistair, we know you're in there. Release the hostage and come out with your hands on your head. You're surrounded. There's no way out. Don't make this worse than it already is." "They'll kill me," Edward whispered, more to himself than to Marina. "They'll arrest me. I'll rot in jail, all because of you." His mind was clearly breaking apart. Years of arrogance, of always being in control, of getting everything he wanted through money and manipulation, all crashing down at once. "Edward, please," Marina tried again. "Let me go. You don't have to do this. You're not a killer. You've done terrible things, but you can still choose not to do the worst of all. Let me go." For a long moment, Edward just stood there, the gun pointed at Marina, tears streaming down his face. Then, something in him broke. He lowered the gun and collapsed to the floor, sobbing. "I lost everything, and I don't even know how it came to this, how everything went so wrong." Marina felt a strange mix of emotions, relief at being alive, fear still present, and surprisingly a hint of pity for that broken man on the floor. Not forgiveness, never forgiveness, but pity for the pathetic creature Edward had become. But before she could say anything, the warehouse door was breached. SWAT entered, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Edward was subdued in seconds, handcuffed, dragged outside. Marina was freed from the ropes. Her hands were purple, her wrists bleeding where the ropes had cut. But she was alive. Alexander rushed inside as soon as the agents signaled it was safe. He found Marina still sitting in the chair, in shock, trembling. He enveloped her in his arms, and only then did Marina let the tears fall. She cried from relief, from accumulated fear, from exhaustion. Alexander just held her, stroking her hair, whispering that everything was all right, that it was over, that she was safe. Marina was taken to the hospital for examinations. Besides some cuts and bruises, she was physically well. Psychologically, it would be a long road, but Dr. Beatrice was already waiting, ready to help Marina process this latest trauma. Edward was arrested in flagrante delicto. In addition to the previous charges of domestic violence, he now faced kidnapping, illegal possession of a firearm, and conspiracy. The two men he hired were also arrested and quickly made a plea deal, completely implicating Edward. There was no longer any escape. Edward would be sentenced to decades in prison. 3 months later, Marina was home with Peter when the phone rang. It was Alexander's lawyer. The verdict for E. The original case had been delivered. Edward Alistair was sentenced to 15 years in prison for grievous bodily harm, domestic violence, and threats. With the kidnapping sentence, which came 2 weeks later, an additional 12 years were added. Edward would spend at least 27 years behind bars. He would be almost 70 when he got out, if he ever did. Marina hung up the phone and looked at Peter, now 7 months old, crawling across the living room carpet. The boy had the eyes of the grandfather he never knew, full of curiosity and kindness. Marina felt a deep peace. It was over. It was truly over. Edward was no longer a threat. She was free, free to live, free to love, free to be who she always was, before he crushed her spirit. The following month, Marina was invited to speak at a conference on domestic violence organized by a London NGO. She almost refused, but Dr. Beatrice encouraged her. "Your story can help other women. It can give hope to those still trapped in this cycle. You're not obligated, but think about it." Marina thought about it and decided to accept. On the day of the conference, she dressed in an emerald green dress that Alexander had given her as a gift. The same shade as her father's eyes, he said, when he presented it to her. Marina looked at herself in the mirror and saw a woman completely different from the one who entered that charity gala almost a year ago. Her hair was healthy, shining. Her face had color, life. Her eyes, once always downcast and frightened, now met the gazes of others with confidence. The conference took place in an auditorium on Oxford Street. It was packed. Hundreds of women and men, activists, healthcare professionals, social workers, lawyers, all there to discuss ways to combat domestic violence and support victims. When Marina stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinded her for a moment. She saw Alexander sitting in the front row, holding Peter in his lap. The baby clapped his hands when he saw his mother, drawing laughter from the audience. Marina took a deep breath and began to speak. "My name is Marina Stone. For 3 years, I was a victim of domestic violence. My then-husband physically, emotionally, and psychologically abused me. He made me believe I was worthless, that I deserved nothing. Better, that I was lucky he tolerated my existence. I believed him. For a long time, I believed him." She paused, looking at the audience. "But today I am here to say that he was wrong. I was worth a lot. I deserved respect, true love, dignity, and so do you. If you are in an abusive situation, know that you are not alone. There are people willing to help. There are ways out, even when it seems there are none. For a long time, I thought silence was survival. Today, I know that speaking out is rebirth. The words came out naturally, sincerely. Marina told her story without dramatizing, without minimizing, just the truth. When she finished, the audience rose. The applause was deafening, laden with emotion and solidarity. Marina saw women crying, hugging each other, recognizing themselves in her story. And she knew she had made the right choice. Her pain had purpose. Her survival had meaning. She was not just a victim. She was a warrior. And her war had been won. After the conference, while Marina chatted with some participants, Alexander waited for her in the lobby with Peter. The baby had fallen asleep in his arms, a peaceful smile on his little face. When Marina finally joined them, Alexander smiled. "You were incredible up there. Your father would have been very proud." Marina looked at Alexander, at the man who saved her not once, but twice, who gave her security when all she knew was fear, who loved her with patience and respect when she thought she could never trust anyone again. "Alexander, I love you," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the clarity and certainty of the words. Alexander looked at her deeply, his eyes shining with emotion. "I love you too, Marina. Always. Have. Since that first night. But I would have waited a lifetime if necessary, until you were ready to hear and believe it." Marina leaned in, and for the first time since they met, she kissed him. It was a soft kiss, laden with promise and hope. A kiss that sealed not the end of a story of pain, but the beginning of a story of true love, built on solid foundations of respect, trust, and mutual care. Peter woke up between them, looked at the two adults, and giggled, as if he knew that finally his little family was complete. In the years that followed, Marina became a recognized activist in the fight against domestic violence. Alexander continued his business work, but now dedicated a large part of his time and resources to social causes. They married in a simple ceremony, with only close friends and family. Peter grew up healthy and happy, never knowing the fear that marked the first months of his existence. Marina never forgot what she went through. The scars, physical and emotional, remained. But they did not define her. She was more than her pain. She was a survivor, a fighter, a mother, a wife, an activist. She was Marina Stone. And her story, however painful it was, had a happy ending. Edward remained in prison, where he faced the harsh reality of being a man accustomed to power and luxury in an environment that respected neither power nor luxury. They say he spent years trying to overturn his conviction, but without success. Eventually, the rage transformed into resignation. He would live and die behind those bars, paying for the harm he caused. It was delayed justice, but justice nonetheless. And Marina, looking out the window of her Chelsea home on a sunny morning, with Alexander preparing coffee in the kitchen and Peter playing in the living room, finally felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Full happiness. Not the superficial happiness of fleeting moments, but the deep happiness of someone who survived the storm and found peace on the other side. She had been through the fire and emerged stronger. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could take that from her. Again. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Marina and Alexander's story has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming, strength, and true love, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you most in this story. Was it Marina's courage in facing her abuser? Alexander's kindness in honoring the promise made to her father? Or perhaps the message that it's never too late to start over? Every day we bring intense stories like this, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, stories that make us reflect on our own lives and how we can be better. We await you in the next episode, where another emotional journey awaits you.